Hola and welcome to ProSpanish. So there are thousands of words that you already know in Spanish. It's just a case of getting the formulas so that you can unlock them. So we're going to do that, but also there's no point in learning words in isolation. We want to be able to use them in sentences, and that's exactly what you'll be able to do by the end of the lesson. So to get us started, we're going to have some, I'll call these helper words, which will be left on the screen so that even if you're a complete beginner, you'll be able to do this lesson and come away with lots and lots of new language and an ability to speak in sentences. So let's have a look. Our first line of words will just be tengo, I have, tengo. Don't worry about memorizing these, they'll stay up on the screen. So tengo, I have. Quiero, I want. QU is pronounced K, not Qu, so it's not quiero, but quiero. I'm looking for is busco, busco. I'm looking for, busco. And es is it's, es. Es fantástico, it's fantastic, for example. Then we have underneath some kind of qualifiers, so un poco, a bit, un poco, a bit or a little. Muy is very, muy, very. Demasiado, demasiado is too, so too big, too small, demasiado. And finally, bastante is quite, quite. And then we'll just have, just kind of randomly, let's have algo, which is something, because it's so useful, algo. And we'll have un coche, a car. Okay, so let's have a quick practice putting those together. How would you say, just looking at these words that we've just done, how would you say, I have something? What would that be? I have something. Tengo algo. Tengo algo. How about I'm looking for something? What would that be? Busco algo. Busco algo. And well, for this one, let's just add in the word importante, because it's so easy. Importante, important. How would you say it's important? Es importante. Es importante. How about I've got or I have something quite important? So just put the words together. I have something quite important. What would that be? Tengo algo bastante importante. Tengo algo bastante importante. How about I'm looking for a car? So just 3 words. I'm looking for a car. What would that be? Busco un coche. Busco un coche. Okay, so that just gets us a bit more familiar with our helper words. So let's have a look at our first formula. And that is words in English that end in IC, like classic, basic. In Spanish, it's ico. And of course, there are hundreds of these. So let's have a look at some of the examples I've got. Fantástico, fantástico. So fantastic in English, but ico in Spanish. Fantástico. Basic is básico, básico. Electric, eléctrico. Classic, clásico. Automatic, automático, automático. And of course there are hundreds more of these. So let's put these into some sentences. So how would you say, let's just say simply, It's fantastic. What would that be? It's fantastic. Es fantástico. Es fantástico. It's fantastic. And so obviously it's basic would just be es básico, es básico. But how would you say it's a bit basic? What would that be? It's a bit basic. Es un poco básico. Es un poco básico. Now, you may or may not know that in Spanish, when you use an adjective, it comes after the noun. So we would say a classic car, and in Spanish it would be a car classic. We would say a fantastic idea, and in Spanish it would be an idea fantastic. Okay, so how would we say a classic car? What would that be? Un coche clásico. Un coche clásico. A classic car. A car classic. How about I've got a classic car? What would that be? Tengo un coche clásico. Tengo un coche clásico. It's an electric car. What would that be? It's an electric car. Es un coche eléctrico. Es un coche eléctrico. Now, of course, there are lots more examples that I could do now, but I want us to get in as many of these formulas as possible. And of course, I include these formulas in my all-in-one course, although it's done in a much more step-by-step way, depending on the sequence of what else you're being taught. And our next one is T going to dad. Might sound a bit odd, so let's go straight to some examples. So activity, so that TY gets changed to DAD, dad. So actividad, activity, actividad. And all of these words with the dad ending are feminine. So you'll have to try and remember that all the dads are feminine in Spanish, and that might help you remember it. So it'd be una actividad. And just a word on the pronunciation. When the letter D in Spanish is kind of surrounded by vowels in the middle of a word, or even towards the end of a word, the D is not pronounced as a hard D as it is in English. It's not actividad. It's not like a dad sound. It's much softer, dad. Almost between a D and a hard TH sound. Actividad. So una actividad, an activity. An opportunity, same formula. Una oportunidad. Una oportunidad. So not una oportunidad, una oportunidad. And then we have two which have a kind of slight extra change, and it's calidad and cantidad. So quality and quantity. And the reason for this is that in Spanish, the QU sound is always pronounced like a K, and a K sound, when you've got an A after it, would be spelt with a C. So over the years, the spelling has evolved into a C sound. Of course, they all have the original Latin root, but spellings evolve over time. So calidad and cantidad. Quality and quantity. And of course, there are so many more of these, like society, sociedad, etc. So let's put these together in some sentences. How would you say, I'm looking for quality? I'm looking for quality. What would that be? Busco calidad. Busco calidad. I'm looking for quality. It's a fantastic activity. What would that be? It's a fantastic activity. And remember, the adjective comes after. So, es una actividad. And before I finish, you might not have known that you needed to change the adjective fantástico to feminine. Because if the word that it's describing is feminine, then the adjective has to be feminine. So we would change the O to an A, fantástica. So a fantastic activity is una actividad fantástica. Una actividad fantástica. And how would you say it's a basic opportunity? It's a basic opportunity. What would that be? So the same rules apply. Es una oportunidad básica. Es una oportunidad básica. And we'll just take a quick pause there while I mention our very popular Levels 1 to 6 course. This takes the complete beginner or a near beginner right up to a conversational level of Spanish in a series of very easy to follow steps. All the lessons on this YouTube channel are supplementary, whereas the core Levels 1 to 6 is very much a step-by-step program delivered by the same teacher as all the other videos on the ProSpanish YouTube channel. And while the style is very similar to what you'll be used to from these videos on the channel, the key difference is that every lesson carefully builds on the previous lessons so that you can really feel that progress of going from very little or no Spanish up to a level where you can confidently hold a conversation in Spanish. So again, that's available exclusively from prospanish.co.uk. And next we have words that end in us, O-U-S in English, very often go to O-S-O, oso. So famous, famoso. Delicious, delicioso. Curious, curioso. Nervous, nervioso. Remember the V is pronounced like a B. Nervioso. Well, actually, it's a soft B. Think of it a bit like that D we discussed earlier, that when it's surrounded by vowels, goes a bit softer. So it's not B, but kind of the lips just touching V. Nervioso. Nervioso. And generous. Generoso. Generoso. How would you say it's quite famous? Es bastante famoso. Es bastante famoso. How about a delicious pizza? So a pizza, una pizza. So a delicious pizza, a pizza delicious. What would that be? Una pizza deliciosa. Remember, pizza's feminine, ends in an A, it's feminine, so the describing word, the adjective, has to be feminine as well. So, una pizza deliciosa. And for this next one, we'll go back to one we did earlier. How would you say? It's a curious activity. It's a curious activity. It's an activity curious. What would that be? Es una actividad curiosa. Es una actividad curiosa. Now, there are many more of these formulas, and I'll just briefly go through some of them. Of course, in my all-in-one course, there's more time to incorporate them and sequence them throughout the course. But for this video, we'll just squeeze in what we can. So, words that end in B-L-E are often also B-L-E in Spanish. So, possible, posible. Terrible, terrible. Probable, probable. Flexible, flexible. It's flexible. Es flexible. And similarly, the ending is the same in English and Spanish for a lot of AL words that end in AL. So normal, normal. No es normal, it's not normal. Total, total. Final, final. Brutal, brutal. Original, original. Do you remember before we said that all the dads are feminine? So una oportunidad, an opportunity. So all those are feminine nouns. And the same applies to this formula. So in English, a lot of, maybe most, words that end in T-I-O-N. In Spanish, C-I-O-N, and the O is with an accent. And these are also all feminine words. So an invitation, una invitación. An action, una acción. Station, estación. There's the extra E there at the beginning, and that's because in Spanish the sound system does not like ST at the beginning of a word. It has to always add an E before it, so it's estación. So sometimes when you hear Spanish people saying the name Steve or Stephen, they say Steve, Steve. They find it very difficult to pronounce the ST straight off. And I guess that's why you have Esteban for Esteban, or like the equivalent of Stephen. Fraction, una fracción. A situation, una situación. So, una situación curiosa. A curious, a strange situation. And let's squeeze in one more. So, words in English that end in ment, like argument, document. In Spanish, mento. So, document, documento, argument, argumento. Es un argumento básico. Es un argumento básico. It's a basic argument. Fragment, fragmento, un fragmento. And experiment, experimento. Es un experimento clásico. Es un experimento clásico. It's a classic experiment. So you can see how using these formulas plus key structures taught in a step-by-step sequenced way leads to really fast progress when you're learning Spanish. And if you haven't already joined the thousands of users from all around the world who are learning Spanish with ProSpanish, then go over to prospanish.co.uk where you can download the full all-in-one course.